Hello! Today's video is about the interlock switches, like these here. I was doing that double slab cook, and during that double slab cook I kept getting a open message right here like that, and I found that was obviously turning off my my cook, even though I hear the fan running right now. But for some reason also this switch up here on the top was intermittent, and so between that open and this I would go like this, about 50 times or so, just opening and closing it, and eventually I would close the door and the fan would come on. But then I also had a double failure in that I was getting that open door indication over here. So I was doing the 50 on here, and for good measure down there at the fire door I was doing 50 pushes on that as well. So the good news was is that I got through the cook. The bad news was is that I had to sit here and make sure by keeping my eye on the temperature, because the temperature would drop, but I wouldn't get a warning that the temperature was dropping. So I knew that, okay, I got some switches, I need to replace them. So I went to MasterBuilt's parts page, and I started looking at all the items that I could order, and sure enough I found the interlock switch, or the door switch. So I went ahead and proceeded to go to add it to my shopping cart, and they were out of stock. Couldn't get them. So then I started searching you guys on YouTube, and I started going with door failures or interlock switches or door sensors. I was doing several different searches, and I ended up with over 20 videos of all of us having the same intermittent problem, and a lot of guys had a package with the switch in it and a bunch of extra wires. So I knew that, you know, that's what they were getting from MasterBuilt, but MasterBuilt doesn't have them, right? And I thought, okay, after this cook is over, and then I'm going to tear into one of these switches and see what I find. And I was impressed. The insides of the switch should last forever. I ended up putting a real strong loop that I have, and I got right down to looking at the surface of the contact, figuring that I have like a burnishing tool that I could polish the end of the contacts and try to get a little extra life out of them until I could get the new ones sent to me. But they were perfect. There was nothing wrong with them. Then I started noticing that the switch was kind of greasy or oily, and I thought, you know, I'm not sure that grease mixed with smoke and ash is conductive, you know. So I thought, all right, well, let me clean one. And I cleaned it and put it back in there, and it just so happened the one I did was the one here for the door, and sure enough the open sign went away. So like right now, just as I barely cracked the door, you know, you can hear when it opens and closes. So this is, you know, I can get it to open that far before. So there's a real good contact. You don't, the whole thing doesn't need to be fully up. It's just, you know, about halfway and off it goes. Now this one, if you listen after that jet goes by, it just beeps letting you know that the door's open. But as I take this down here, you can still hear the fan. So this one doesn't affect the fan. This just strictly is your hood. But let me open up this one. Now you can, the fan just stopped. Now if I press down a little on it, fan's coming back on. Fan's off. Fan's on. Now granted, I've got this stainless steel cover on here that adds just a little more height to it, but that stainless steel cover has been on there since the day I got it. But sure enough, taking this switch apart and cleaning it got that to work just fine, as well as down here. You'll see the button at the very bottom corner down here, and see as I open the door, now you can hear the fan again. So that's what you want, but when it's breaking on you and you haven't paid attention to that, you don't know exactly which one to go for. So when I saw the open, I thought, well, does it mean the firebox is open? So anyway, one thing led to another. So everything I'm going to show you from now on here is me pulling these switches, taking them to my workbench, and putting maintenance on them. And I suspect that what I just did should last beyond whatever, probably by now 20 some odd cooks, 25 cooks that I've done. So I'm going to hope that it lasts way longer than that, because I'm using a dielectric grease, and the dielectric grease actually has the component of passing electricity through it easily. So I packed it with a little of the dielectric grease inside the cylinder, so that when it actuates, it's actually mushing that stuff around all the time, and that way any smoke going by won't have a chance to get onto those contact points. Now, I released a video a couple of days ago that you probably already saw. There was no voice. It was strictly pictures that I had taken, and I put each part up and then I typed in what you were looking at. But I finally had a chance to get this thing to where I can get my hands on it with the time to go into the shop. So I'm not suggesting taking these switches apart. It's not that hard. But if you're the type of person that kind of gets impatient and then you bang things, I wouldn't do this. You're going to find that you almost need a third hand. Once I put the dielectric grease in, I discovered I didn't really need the third hand as much, because the grease was holding things, but then everything got slippery. So you're back to needing a third hand for a different reason. But anyway, let me go like this. Okay, this switch is the one that I made the other video about, which was all pictures and me typing in the information. This video today is me talking about it, a little more about what I saw and what is going on. So taking this apart, and you'll have to refer back to the last video to see all the pieces parts. This thing is built really well. The only problem is our machines, our smokers put out so much smoke and probably little grease particles and stuff. It probably gets inside of our electronics here and prevents the contacts from making good contact. I see nothing by taking it apart that would have me think that anything ever needs to be replaced in here. So I'm kind of thinking that there's going to be a maintenance item of washing it and maybe putting some contact grease, like a dielectric grease or something on it, to overcome the smoke that our machines put out and causing these things to fail. If you were going to take one of these apart, and I do not recommend it, it's this silver part, the one with the screw in it here and that goes around. If you look right here, it's got a little flange that sticks out, as well as on that side. Those little pieces are actually stuck into a little clip that's built into this plastic barrel. So if you were to slide something along the edge here to get that to pop up a little high, that spring will come off, and this bottom clip here that you can see the seam on will come out, and at that point the thing just falls apart into your hand. And again, after doing this, I see nothing that would be worth going in there for again. There's two springs with a little center piston or flange And one spring is what, well, it's a total of 3 springs, but there's 2 on the actual plunger here that help center this in this position that's sticking out. And then there's an overall bigger spring that overdrives the top spring a little bit. Notice if you try to pull this out, it's a little mushy, but it won't come any farther, and that's because the bigger spring is pushing this whole assembly up. The contact for making this work would be these. These are 2 separate pieces that you'll also see in the video. And at the very end of it, way up here somewhere, is where it kind of like hooks over with the contact on the bottom. And then on this plunger, where that little piston piece is a, you'll see it, it's a little metal, kind of like an H with an O in the middle to fit around the shaft. So the idea would be that this needs to go in about halfway, so this plunger's coming down, and then we'll make contact with these guys. So it's something that I don't think we need to rush out and buy backups for. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to wash it with an electric parts cleaner that I use for a lot of things. It's not flammable, but I would not do this in the cooker, and I wouldn't do it in the cooker with it plugged in. This is something that I would do outside of the machine, because I don't know, this stuff is not food quality. So I don't think you would want it dripping around anywhere, be it on the briquettes and becoming smoke and then becoming part of our food, or if it was on the hood and then it dripped inside somewhere and then it kind of like smoked up because it hit a warm surface. So I'm saying all this needs to be done outside and then allowed to air dry for a little while. So I don't think I would take one apart unless you had another one nearby. In other words, buy one, so that if you take one apart and you finally after a while give up and just don't want to deal with it, at least you have another one. Yeah, so don't take any recommendations. I'm just reporting what I did, with this particular problem that I ran across, unlike the other mods that actually had a conclusion. Okay, so I'm taking this apart. I'm going to let you see me taking it apart so you can see it's kind of crazy. I used my little screwdriver there, the blade, to go down on both sides of those outer metal clips that I was saying that those little protrusions fit into the plastic there. You can see how it's dropped down, and right off the bat it wants to explode open. So I'll let you see that where I've released it, and at that point this bottom cap came off. The spring that locks it all in place came off. These little electrical contacts, let me just get that spring out of the way. These little electrical contacts come out, and you can see that on here are those little contact points, and under a high magnification those contacts were not pitted or anything, and that's why I said they would need grease. And then down inside you can sort of see that round piece, but it's got those 4 little pieces that stick out. Down here in this corner you can see that that's another contact spot, and then on the opposite side over here is the other contact spot. So now that I've got it this far, I might as well pull the plunger out because it's already even. So if I push on that end, you can see that that now comes out. So this barrel is now empty, and that's where I'm going to just put in some grease, just moosh it in there. Slides up and down, so it's all sort of important in there. So I'm going to reassemble this by putting this button. This is the part that sticks out through the top of the switch. So I'm going to put a gob of grease on here, and then slide these two pieces back in, and then load in my spring, and then put in the top piece over the two pieces sticking through them. And at that point, once I have it all together, then I will put on the top part. And I have sent away for a tripod, so my videos hopefully will get a little bit better. Do not have a tripod yet. Who knew that I was going to enjoy doing this? Alright, so back to two hands. I'm going to put probably as much grease as you see sticking there. I'll probably put that and another one of those worth inside. So as far as I'm concerned, that's going to be like a transmission now. It's going to have all this electrical grease in there and should not ever cause a problem again. Okay, got it back together, and it's probably about half filled with the grease all around that contact area. And I can actually feel that the button isn't as easy to push now. I mean, of course it is, but I'm aware that it's a little bit firmer, which tells me then that that grease is in there, and I'll guarantee you that water or whatever is not going to get to the point where it will displace that grease. That's gonna be it. So I'm gonna go and grab the other two switches and take them apart and go through this whole process. So okay, so I removed that screw, and I removed this screw, and it slides back. So, piece of cake. Alright, so let me take these apart and clean them, and I'm going to look to see if the inside of the switches look dirty. The last one did not. When I took it apart, it was rather pristine looking, and I'm really hoping that these are too, which then lets me know that it's just a slight film that's getting in there, because I'd hate to think that it's filling up with ash or junk inside there. But that dielectric grease will keep everything away from the contacts in the future. That's for darn sure. Okay, a couple of things. First, I ended up washing just the tops off of the two switches, and I got all that. And that tells me that, yes, there is your cooking grease that's getting on there. Then I soaked this cloth, and then I ended up cleaning the plunger on the outside, and was able to still pull off more grease. After taking the switch apart, I noticed that the plunger is discolored right above that little contact plate. I don't know how to get that, but it's that coloration there just before the metal that is causing that color. So that tells me that, you know, that's not, that part doesn't stick out of the switch. That's the part that's inside the switch. So yeah, the cooking is getting in there. So I'll wash this plunger off. I'll get all this stuff off of here, and then I'm going to put it all back together clean. When I looked at the barrel inside, it seemed clean, but I'll spray it and with the electric cleaner there, and get it to the point where it's as pristine as possible, and do that the same to the next one. Getting my probes on here, and then pressing the button. Of course, it's making contact and it's showing where the meter is. But when I was just wiggling it like this meter was going kind of crazy. It was going in and out a little bit. Now that I've got it all back together with grease and I'm actuating it, it's staying rock solid. So the connection is more 100%, it seems like. These kind of switches tend to be more bothered, not so much by the contact, but for the low voltage, because these are like low voltage sensors, I believe. And the fact that I was going past halfway and then just kind of like wiggling it and then seeing the meter fluctuate out here tells me that those could be high, and maybe I didn't have the meter more sensitive to where maybe I would have gotten a bigger swing, but It's all in the measurement. But since the dielectric grease is in there, that meter, once it makes contact and goes over, it just stays there no matter how much I wiggle this. So that's more confidence to me that the low voltage signal going through this switch is going to be less affected by the grease. And again, all this here came off the switches, and you saw this before, but then this is actually even after I was cleaning the plunger inside. So yep, there is grease that was getting, cooking grease that was getting inside these switches. So I'm going to have to say that I don't know if I'll be revisiting this problem. And if I do, I'll let you know. Meanwhile, let me put these back in and do a fan test. I won't light anything. I'll just turn on the computer and see if the fans come on with the doors closed, and actuate each one of them and see what happens. So like right now, just as I barely crack the door, you can hear when it opens and closes. But let me open up this one. Now you can, the fan just stopped. Now if I press down a little on it, fan's coming back on. Fan's off. Fan's on. Now granted, I've got this stainless steel cover on here that adds just a little more height to it, but that stainless steel cover has been on there since the day I got it. But sure enough, taking this switch apart and cleaning it got that to work just fine. You see the button at the very bottom corner down here, and see as I open the door, now you can hear the fan again. So that's what you want. But when it's breaking on you and you haven't paid attention to that, you don't know exactly which one to go for. So when I saw the open, I thought, well, does it mean the firebox is open? So anyway, one thing led to another. I'm not suggesting taking these switches apart. It's not that hard. But if you're the type of person that kind of gets impatient and then you bang things, I wouldn't do this. You're going to find that you almost need a third hand. Once I put the dielectric grease in, I discovered I didn't really need the third hand as much because the grease was holding things, but then everything got slippery. So you're back to needing a third hand for a different reason. But anyway,